The clinking of champagne glasses echoed through the garden like a soft warning bell. Designer shoes dug into manicured grass, laughter rose in little waves, and the air carried that uncomfortable weight, the kind you can't name but feel pressing down on your chest. Isla didn't belong here. At least, not in their eyes. She stood near the table lined with finger foods, her fingers gently wrapped around a glass of lemonade, because she didn't drink, not anymore. Her dress was plain. A soft blue cotton summer dress she bought off clearance. Not silk. Not embroidered. Not what the others were wearing. Why did she even come? Her sister hissed. Not quietly enough. Isla froze. The lemon stung her tongue as she took a slow sip, pretending she hadn't heard. She's not really one of us, her sister added, a mocking tilt in her voice. The words didn't hurt like knives. They were worse. They were truths she'd tasted before, truths that had grown familiar. But she smiled politely and placed her drink down, turning slowly. Her sister, Alina, was surrounded by cousins in heels and laughter. Their bracelets jingled like wind chimes, sweet to others, grating to Isla. She met Alina's eyes. I heard you, Isla said simply, not in anger. Just fact. Alina blinked, startled she'd been caught, but smirked anyway. Well, it's not like I was wrong. The others chuckled, a little unsure, eyes darting back and forth like they were watching a tennis match of decency. Before Isla could respond, a voice rose behind her. A man clearing his throat. Everyone turned. The host of the event, Mr. Bryson, held a crystal glass high above his head, standing atop the small staircase that led to the indoor ballroom. This reunion, he announced, only exists because of one person. Murmurs rose. Isla's heart paused. Her mouth went dry. She doesn't know it yet, Bryson continued, smiling softly, but the reason we are gathered here today, the reason this family isn't bankrupt, the reason we still have this estate, is all because of Isla.
Gasps.
Audible.
Loud.
Sharp. Alina dropped her champagne flute. The glass didn't shatter. It bounced on the grass like even the earth refused to let the moment be ruined by noise. Mr. Bryson pointed toward Isla. She made a sacrifice 3 years ago that none of you know about. One that saved all of us. You call her not one of you. His voice was calm, but carried steel beneath it. She's the best of you. Alina opened her mouth, but no words came. Isla's hands trembled. Not with anger, not with pride, but with a slow, almost aching pulse of finally being seen. The silence after Bryson's words was deafening. It spread across the lawn like fog, seeping into everyone's carefully kept appearances. Isla didn't move. Not at first. Every eye had turned to her, yet she stood still, as if the wrong movement would shatter the fragile truth hanging in the air. Alina was the first to speak. What does he mean? Her voice cracked, suddenly small. What's sacrifice? Isla didn't answer. Bryson stepped down the stairs and walked toward the stunned group, his gaze scanning each face. 3 years ago, the family business was on the brink of collapse. You all remember the failed acquisition? The lawsuits? The debts? Heads nodded. But what none of you knew, he continued, stopping beside Isla, was that someone stepped in when the rest of you ran. Someone took out a personal loan, backed by her own tiny home and savings, and covered the legal costs. Quietly, anonymously. That person was Isla. A gasp escaped Isla's aunt's lips. Alina's face twisted. That's impossible. Isla didn't have that kind of money. She was working retail. She didn't have the money, Bryson corrected. She borrowed it. Risked everything she had. I don't believe this, Alina said quickly, her voice rising, eyes darting toward the cousins. Why wouldn't she say anything? Isla finally stepped forward. Because I didn't do it for thanks, or to be included in your wine-soaked brunches or gossip rings. I did it because, despite how you all made me feel, this family mattered to me. At least, the memory of what it used to be did. Her voice didn't tremble. It was warm. Sad, maybe, but not weak. One of the cousins, a quiet one, Emma, spoke up. Wait, was it your house that was sold? Isla nodded. You said you moved into a rental by choice. Another nod. The family stared, faces drained of color. And then, unexpectedly, a slow clap started. From the corner. It was her Uncle Thomas, the black sheep of the older generation. He'd always been half forgotten, always reading, always observing. While we were sipping champagne and gossiping about who had a better dress, he said, still clapping, "This girl saved our name." More claps followed. A few slow at first. Then faster.
Genuine.
Real. Alina's eyes welled with tears, but Isla didn't want pity. Not now. Because this was not about revenge. It was about truth. And truth was heavier than vengeance. But it freed her far more. The applause eventually faded, but its echo remained in every look Isla received. She didn't know what to do with the attention. She wasn't used to being seen. Not like this. Not with admiration. Most of her life, she'd been the quiet one at the edge of every photo, cropped out of conversations and memories both. But today, for the first time, they couldn't look away. Still, the ache in her chest didn't leave. Kindness couldn't erase years of being unseen. It couldn't undo the moments she stood at doorways holding gifts no one opened. It couldn't unhear the whispers Alina never meant for her to hear. Mr. Bryson gently touched her shoulder. There's something else. Isla looked at him, confused. There's more? He nodded and handed her a small envelope. It was cream-colored, thick, sealed with red wax bearing the family crest, an ivy branch wrapped around a sword.
She recognized it.
This was the kind of letter reserved for bloodline matters, estate transitions, heirlooms, legacy transfers. She blinked. What is this? Your grandfather left this for you. Specifically for you. It was to be given only when the family gathered in full. Her heart tripped. He passed 2 years ago.
Yes.
And he knew this day would come. He arranged for it. Isla turned the envelope over slowly, hands trembling slightly as she broke the wax seal. The silence was so thick it nearly had weight. Every eye on that lawn, sisters, cousins, aunts, uncles, watched her. She unfolded the thick paper. To Isla, my quiet legacy. If they're reading this to you now, it means the others finally see what I saw long ago. Your fire beneath still waters. She swallowed. Hard. I chose you, Isla, not because you shouted the loudest or stood in spotlights, but because you were the only one who listened, who acted. When the company failed, and your father and uncles bickered and ran, it was you who stood at my side. No cameras. No praise. Just loyalty. Heart. This estate, our ancestral home, is yours now. A loud gasp broke from somewhere behind her, but she kept reading. Don't give it back to them, not out of pity or peacekeeping. Let them earn your forgiveness, not your silence. Lead with the strength they never understood in you. This house is yours to restore, or to walk away from forever. But either way, remember, you were always more than enough. With pride, grandfather. The letter fell slightly in her hands, fingertips numb, her heart hammering. The estate? Hers? The shock had only just begun to ripple through the crowd. Her Uncle Dean stepped forward, mouth parting like a man who had something to say, but had never practiced humility before. Isla, this must be a mistake. That letter was hand-delivered, Bryson interrupted, his voice calm but firm. Kept in our law office vault with strict instructions. Isla is now the sole owner of the property, as well as 75% of the remaining family shares. Isla blinked. 75%? Her father, who had never once stood up for her at any family dinner, was pale, like someone had pulled the ground from under him. Her mother had a wine glass half raised, now shaking as she lowered it. Alina's mouth moved, but no words came. Alina finally managed. You can't be serious. Isla met her sister's eyes for the first time without shrinking. I didn't ask for any of this, she said, voice quiet but solid. But I'm not giving it back just to make you feel better. But you're not even. Alina bit her lip before finishing the sentence. Not even what? Not even family? Not even worthy? Not even wanted? I'm exactly what this family needed, Isla said. Even if none of you saw it, the silence was thick, but it didn't hurt anymore. Isla wasn't outside the room anymore. She was the room. And the door had finally opened for her to decide who got to stay. That night, Isla sat alone on the edge of the grand balcony that wrapped around the second floor of the estate. The golden lights of the garden below flickered as the last of the reunion guests quietly trickled out, too stunned to gossip, too shaken to pretend. The wine had run dry, but so had the cruelty. For the first time, it was silent in the most peaceful way. She wrapped her cardigan tightly around her shoulders as the wind rolled over her skin. Everything that happened earlier kept replaying in her head: Bryson's announcement, the letter, the inheritance, the expressions. Especially Alina's. Not of jealousy, but disbelief. Isla had spent her life standing just outside of love. She was included by name, but not by heart. Her father praised Alina. Her mother echoed it. Family vacations didn't have space for her. Family photos always had her on the edge.
But now?
Now she owned the house they used to keep her out of. She heard footsteps. Turning slowly, she found Alina standing a few feet away, her heels off, her expensive dress slightly wrinkled, her mascara smudged from the crying she'd tried to do in private. They stared at each other. I didn't know, Alina said first, voice hoarse. I didn't know, Isla. You didn't ask. Alina looked away. I thought you were just, she trailed off.
What?
Bitter? Lonely? A burden? Alina's face cracked. I thought you were overreacting. That you liked being alone. No one likes being erased, Alina. You just convinced yourselves I enjoyed the silence because it made it easier for you not to include me. Her sister took a deep breath, eyes glistening in the soft moonlight. I didn't realize how invisible we made you feel. Isla didn't say anything.
She didn't have to.
The weight of those years had already settled in Alina's shoulders. Then came a whisper. But you still came, Alina said.
To the reunion.
Even after everything. I came, Isla said, because despite everything, a part of me always hoped someone would finally look at me and see more than a placeholder. Alina's face folded in grief, not anger. I'm sorry, she whispered. Isla studied her for a long moment. I'm not here to humiliate you, Isla said gently. Or to take things just because I can. That's not who I am. Alina blinked, confused. But this house, this responsibility, it's mine now. And I'll protect it. That doesn't mean I'll shut everyone out. But I won't shrink anymore just to make others comfortable. She paused, then added, You made me feel small for most of my life. But today, I found out I was the one holding everything together. Alina looked away, ashamed. Can I help? She asked suddenly. Help with what? Fixing things. Making this house feel like a home again. For everyone. Isla stared. Her heart didn't soften instantly. This wasn't a fairy tale. This was real life. And real forgiveness took time. But maybe the first step wasn't about forgetting the past. Maybe it was about rebuilding from it. Start by coming inside, Isla said finally. We'll talk. No cameras. No show. Just sisters. Alina nodded, eyes misty. They stepped inside the estate, one that had been rebuilt once by sacrifice. And maybe, this time, by grace. Morning came with golden sunlight draping the estate like a blessing. The walls, once cold and echoing with formality, now seemed to breathe differently, as if the truth that had finally been spoken had stripped away years of silent resentment and icy politeness. Isla stood in the hallway outside the study, holding a mug of coffee with both hands. She hadn't slept.
She didn't need to.
Something inside her had shifted, and sleep felt irrelevant compared to the weight of what lay ahead. Ownership wasn't just a title, it was responsibility. And in this family, responsibility had never been shared fairly. It had always been traded behind closed doors, passed between the powerful, and never offered to those who stood quietly at the margins. Until now. The study door was slightly ajar. She stepped inside. Stacks of old financial documents lay on the grand oak desk, still where her grandfather had left them in his final months. There was a dusty leather notebook in the corner, and nestled inside it was a handwritten list of names, charities, former employees, community projects that her grandfather had supported secretly, without fanfare. Isla traced her fingers over them.
She understood now.
She wasn't just inheriting a house or stock percentages. She was inheriting values. The kind of values that weren't praised at family dinners but whispered between the good souls who kept things running behind the scenes. There was a knock at the door. She turned. Her father. He hadn't said a word to her since the announcement. He had spent most of the evening in the East Wing library, pacing, as if trying to rewrite his own memories. Now he looked different. Smaller. Like a man who had finally realized how little he truly knew. "May I?" he asked, gesturing to the room. Isla nodded. He stepped in but didn't sit. His hands were folded behind his back, posture stiff.
He had always been a proud man.
Too proud, maybe. And pride is a hard thing to swallow when the world you built on ego starts to crumble. "I wanted to apologize," he said, voice quieter than she'd ever heard it. She didn't reply. I didn't know everything you had done. What you gave up. I assumed." He shook his head.
No.
"I didn't assume. I didn't care enough to ask." Isla looked at him. "And now, I care," he said without hesitation. "Not just because of what you've inherited. Not because of power. But because I finally see who you are. And I'm ashamed it took public embarrassment for me to notice the strength you carried alone all these years." He paused, taking a breath. "I know I have no right to ask this, but will you let me help? With the estate. With rebuilding. Even if it's just the groundskeeping. I want to do something useful. For you." Isla stared at him for a long time. She remembered how many birthdays he'd skipped. How many Christmases she'd spent in the corner while he toasted Alina's scholarships. But now, his eyes weren't full of excuses. They were full of regret. And maybe, just maybe, that was worth something. She nodded slowly. "If you want help, start by speaking to the staff. Learn their names. Listen to them. Respect them. That's what Grandpa did." He bowed his head slightly. "I will." Later that day, Isla stood before the family. She'd called them back to the main hall, not for confrontation, but for clarity. "I'm not removing anyone from the property," she announced. "No one is being exiled. No one is being punished. But things will change." They were silent, waiting. From this day on, this estate will no longer run on titles or bloodlines. If you want a voice here, you'll earn it through contribution, through service, through community, not gossip, not inheritance. Murmurs stirred. This house will open its doors to more than just cocktail parties and hollow reunions. There are families in this town who go hungry, students with no books, women rebuilding their lives with nothing but hope. This estate will serve them. Aunt Margot blinked in shock. "You want to turn it into a charity?" "No," Isla said calmly. "I want to turn it into a home. One that means something." The cousins exchanged glances, unsure how to respond. But behind them, Emma, the quiet cousin who'd always sat beside Isla at the kids' table, stepped forward. "I want to help," she said. "Whatever you need." Then came Uncle Thomas.
Me too.
"It's about time we made this place count." One by one, the murmurs became voices. And the voices became pledges. Not everyone joined in. Alina stood at the back, arms folded. She hadn't spoken since their conversation on the balcony. But Isla caught her eyes and in them, saw something she hadn't before. Not jealousy. Respect. And that was enough. Months passed. The estate slowly transformed, not physically at first, but in spirit. Locals were welcomed in for workshops, gardens were open to school programs, and a forgotten reading room was converted into a women's shelter resource space. And every Friday night, in the same backyard where Isla had once overheard her sister mocking her, they held community dinners. No guest lists. No ranks. Just long tables, shared meals, and laughter that echoed all the way to the gates. One evening, Alina sat beside her, handing out plates. "You really did it," she said softly. "You changed everything." Isla smiled, watching kids run barefoot through the grass where champagne glasses once clinked.
No, she said.
I just reminded everyone what family is supposed to look like. And in that moment, she knew the best revenge wasn't about proving them wrong. It was about becoming the kind of woman they could never again overlook.
Enjoy your dirt, Samantha. My sister Clara's voice rang in my ears like a cruel melody as she pranced away with her new car keys in hand, a smirk plastered across her face. Her words dripped with mockery, and her entourage of friends laughed along like a pack of hyenas. I stood frozen at the edge of the dusty driveway, staring at the crumbling barn and the overgrown fields stretching out before me. This was it, my inheritance, a rundown farm in the middle of nowhere. While Clara got the family mansion, the luxury cars, and an obscene amount of cash, I was left with this dirt. The lawyer had read my parents' will just hours ago, his monotone delivery of the verdict sealing my fate. Clara had barely contained her glee as she flaunted her winnings, and I was too numb to react. My parents always favored her, the golden child, the perfect daughter. But this was a slap in the face. The barn's crooked silhouette loomed in the fading light, and I clenched my fists, my nails digging into my palms. Fine, let her laugh. I'd figure something out. I always did. The night was eerily quiet as I stepped into the barn for the first time. The wooden doors creaked like they were groaning under the weight of decades of neglect. Inside, the smell of damp hay and rotting wood was overwhelming, but there was something else, something faintly metallic. I clicked on my flashlight, the beam slicing through the darkness. Cobwebs hung like curtains from the rafters, and rusted tools were scattered across the floor. As I walked deeper into the barn, my foot struck something solid, sending a metallic clang echoing through the stillness. It was an old toolbox, its red paint faded and chipped. Curiosity got the better of me, and I knelt down to open it. Inside, I found a collection of tools, but tucked beneath them was a leather-bound journal. The pages were yellowed with age, and the handwriting was shaky but deliberate. The journal belonged to my grandfather, a man I barely remembered. He died when I was a child, and my parents never spoke of him much. But as I flipped through the pages, I realized this wasn't just a diary. It was a log of his work on the farm. And then, near the back, I found something that made my breath catch. A map. The map was crudely drawn, with markings and symbols I didn't recognize. But one thing was clear. There was something hidden on this farm, and my grandfather had gone to great lengths to document its location. My hands trembled as I traced the lines with my fingers. I flipped back to the journal, searching for clues. My grandfather's entries spoke of long nights, secret projects, and a treasure he'd hidden to protect the family's future. The words, life-changing, and worth everything, were scrawled in bold letters on the final page. Adrenaline surged through me. Could it be true? Could this dilapidated farm hold something valuable enough to rival the fortune Clara had inherited? The thought sent a jolt of determination through me. If there was even a chance, I had to find out. Armed with the map and a shovel, I set out at dawn. The markings led me to the farthest corner of the property, where the grass grew wild and the ground was uneven. According to the map, whatever my grandfather had hidden was buried beneath an old oak tree. I dug for hours, the sun beating down on my back. My hands were blistered, my arms ached, but I refused to stop. Sweat dripped into my eyes, and the sound of the shovel striking the dirt became a rhythm that drowned out my frustration. And then it happened. The shovel hit something solid. I dropped to my knees, frantically scraping away the dirt with my hands. My heart pounded as I uncovered a large, rusted chest. The padlock had long since corroded, and with a few hard tugs, I managed to pry it open. Inside was a sight that left me speechless. Inside the chest was a collection of items wrapped in oilcloth. My hands trembled as I carefully unwrapped the first bundle, revealing a stack of old, faded documents. I flipped through them, my breath catching as I realized what I was holding. Land deeds. Dozens of them. But these weren't just any land deeds. They were for properties located in prime areas, places that had since exploded in value. Beneath the deeds was a small velvet pouch. When I opened it, my jaw dropped. Glittering in the sunlight was a handful of uncut gemstones. Sapphires, emeralds, and rubies, their colors vibrant even through the layer of dust that coated them. But that wasn't all. At the bottom of the chest, wrapped in an even thicker layer of cloth, was a sealed metal tube. I hesitated for a moment before opening it, revealing a set of blueprints. As I unrolled them, my heart raced. These weren't ordinary blueprints. They were plans for a piece of technology, something that looked ahead of its time. My grandfather had been an inventor, and these blueprints seemed to hold the key to something revolutionary. I sat back, staring at the treasure before me. This wasn't just wealth, it was power. And Clara had no idea. I spent the rest of the day poring over the blueprints and documents. The more I read, the clearer it became. My grandfather had been a genius. He'd worked on projects that could have changed industries, but for some reason, he'd kept them hidden. The blueprints detailed a machine that could refine energy more efficiently than anything on the market today. It was the kind of discovery that could disrupt entire industries. As the sun set, I locked everything back in the chest and carried it inside the farmhouse. My mind was racing with possibilities. What should I do with this? Should I sell the gemstones and the land deeds? Should I find someone to build the machine? But one thought kept nagging at me. Why had my grandfather hidden this? And why hadn't he told anyone? That night I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing Clara's mocking voice in my head, and for the first time, I felt something other than anger. I felt pity. She had no idea what she'd missed out on, and for once, I was glad my parents had overlooked me. The next morning, I called a local historian, someone I remembered from a school project years ago. If anyone could help me understand the significance of what I'd found, it was her. When I described the blueprints and the deeds, her voice grew sharp with interest. Your grandfather was a remarkable man, she said, but he was also cautious. He didn't trust many people, especially after what happened with his first invention. What happened? I asked, my curiosity piqued. There were rumors of betrayal. Someone close to him stole his work and made a fortune from it. He never recovered from the betrayal, but he vowed to protect his future creations at all costs. Her words sent a chill down my spine. Betrayal. It seemed to run in the family. Over the next few days, I began to formulate a plan. First, I needed to verify the value of what I'd found. I contacted an appraiser for the gemstones and a lawyer for the land deeds. Both confirmed what I already suspected. I was sitting on a fortune. But the blueprints, they were trickier. I reached out to a tech firm, posing as an inventor with a groundbreaking idea. When they expressed interest, I knew I had something special. Yet, a part of me hesitated. Clara would never let me live in peace if she found out. She'd fight me for every cent, and I didn't trust her not to ruin everything. If I wanted to succeed, I'd have to outsmart her, and anyone else who might try to take what was mine. It didn't take long for Clara to notice the change in me. I stopped answering her calls and began spending my days at the farm, restoring the house and barn while secretly working on the blueprints. When she showed up unannounced one afternoon, I knew she smelled something. Still playing farmer? She sneered, leaning against her expensive car. I heard you've been busy. What's the deal? Just fixing the place up, I said casually, wiping my hands on a rag. Figured I might as well make the best of it. Her eyes narrowed, but she didn't push further. Still, I knew Clara well enough to recognize the wheels turning in her head. She wouldn't let this go. A week later, I came home to find the barn door wide open. My heart dropped as I sprinted inside, fearing the worst. The chest was gone. I knew it was Clara. No one else would have a reason to break in. Rage boiled inside me, but I forced myself to stay calm. If she thought she'd won, she was in for a rude awakening. I stood in the barn, fists clenched, staring at the empty space where the chest had been. My mind raced. Clara thought she was clever, but I knew her well enough to guess her next move. She'd try to sell the gemstones and deeds immediately, cashing in before I could stop her. I grabbed my keys and jumped into my truck, the engine roaring to life. My first stop was her favorite pawn shop in town. Clara loved showing off her finds, even if they weren't hers to begin with. As I sped down the road, I called the shop owner, Mr. Grayson, a man who owed me a favor. "Sam? What's the rush?" he asked, his voice tinged with curiosity. "Clara might come by with something valuable, a chest filled with gemstones and documents. If she does, don't let her sell it. Stall her. I'll explain later." There was a pause. "Understood. I'll keep an eye out." Hanging up, I felt a surge of determination. Clara thought she could outsmart me, but this time she'd crossed the line. I arrived at the shop just as Clara's car pulled into the lot. She stepped out, her face a mask of confidence, the chest tucked under one arm. For a moment, I watched from the truck, anger simmering beneath the surface. This wasn't just about the chest. It was about years of her treating me like I was nothing. She waltzed into the shop, her heels clicking against the floor. I followed a moment later, keeping to the shadows. As she placed the chest on the counter, Mr. Grayson raised an eyebrow. "Interesting find," he said, lifting the lid. His practiced hands examined the gemstones, and I could see the calculation in his eyes. He was stalling just as I'd asked. Before Clara could respond, I stepped forward. "Funny running into you here, Clara." Her head snapped around, her eyes widening in surprise before narrowing in suspicion. "Sam, what are you doing here?" "I could ask you the same thing," I said, my voice cold. "That chest doesn't belong to you." Her lips curled into a smirk. "Oh, please. It was just sitting in that barn, collecting dust. You didn't even know what you had." "Doesn't matter," I shot back. "It's mine." The tension crackled between us like a live wire. Mr. Grayson cleared his throat, sensing the confrontation was about to escalate. "Maybe you two should take this outside," he suggested. "Gladly," I said, grabbing the chest. Clara tried to protest, but I silenced her with a glare. "We're settling this now." Outside, Clara crossed her arms, her smirk returning. "You always did take everything so personally, Sam. Why don't you just admit it? You're jealous. You've always been jealous." "Jealous?" I barked out a bitter laugh. "Of what? Your entitlement? Your arrogance? The way you've always walked over people to get what you want." Her eyes flashed with anger. "I earned everything I have." "No," I said, stepping closer. "You've stolen everything you have. And now you've stolen this. But here's the thing, you don't even understand what you've taken." For the first time, I saw doubt flicker in her expression. "What are you talking about?" I opened the chest, pulling out the blueprints. "This isn't just about money, Clara. This is about legacy. Our grandfather's legacy. He trusted me to find this and protect it, and I'll be damned if I let you ruin it." Her gaze darted to the blueprints, then back to me. "Legacy? Don't make me laugh. All I see is a pile of junk." "That's because you only see dollar signs," I snapped. "But these plans, they could change everything. And you'll never get your hands on them." Clara's laughter faded, replaced by a calculating look. "Fine. You want your precious chest? Take it. But don't think for a second this is over." I knew her well enough to recognize the threat in her voice. Clara didn't back down easily, and she didn't lose gracefully. As she stalked back to her car, I felt a pang of unease. This wasn't the last I'd see of her. I loaded the chest into my truck and drove home, my mind racing. Clara might have backed off for now, but she'd come after me again. I needed to secure the chest and its contents before she had a chance to strike. Back at the farm, I called the historian I'd spoken to earlier. When I explained what had happened, she immediately offered to help. "I can connect you with people who can authenticate the blueprints and ensure they're protected," she said. "But you'll need to be careful. If these plans are as valuable as they seem, others might come after them too." Her words sent a shiver down my spine. Clara was bad enough, but the thought of strangers getting involved was even worse. I thanked her and hung up, determined to stay one step ahead. The farmhouse felt colder that night, as though the walls themselves were bracing for what was coming. I locked the chest in the basement, double-checking every latch and bolt. My paranoia was growing by the minute, but I couldn't shake the feeling that Clara wasn't done with me. Sleep didn't come easy. Every creak of the old house, every whisper of wind outside, set my nerves on edge. Around midnight, I heard something, a soft rustling outside the barn. My stomach dropped. Grabbing the flashlight and the crowbar I kept near the door, I slipped outside, keeping to the shadows. The beam of my flashlight cut through the darkness, landing on a figure crouched near the barn's side window. "Who's there?" I barked. The figure froze, then bolted. I chased them, the flashlight bouncing wildly in my hand. They were fast, but I was faster. Within moments, I tackled them to the ground, wrestling to pin their arms. "Let me go," a familiar voice hissed. My heart sank. "Clara? Are you insane?" I yelled, shining the light on her face. She glared up at me, defiant as ever. "You can't keep this from me, Sam. It's part of our family, and I have every right to it." I hauled her to her feet, my grip firm on her arm. "Breaking into my property? Spying on me? You've gone too far." Clara sneered. "You always act so righteous, but you're no better than me. You're just scared I'll beat you to the punch." "You're wrong," I said coldly. "I'm not scared of you, but you should be scared of what happens if you keep pushing me." After escorting Clara off the property, I knew I couldn't handle this alone anymore. The next morning, I reached out to the historian, Maggie, again. When I explained the situation, she offered more than just advice. She offered her connections. "I know someone who specializes in securing intellectual property," she said. "If those blueprints are as revolutionary as you say, they need to be patented immediately." By midday, I was sitting across from a sharp-eyed woman named Dr. Helena Cross. Her office was lined with bookshelves and blueprints, and her no-nonsense demeanor put me on edge. "These are remarkable," she said after examining the blueprints. "Your grandfather was ahead of his time. But if you want to protect this, you need to act fast. Once the word gets out, you'll have competitors and thieves crawling out of the woodwork." Her warning sent a chill through me. "What do I need to do?" "Leave everything with me," she said. "I'll handle the patent process and secure the necessary funding to bring this to life. But you need to stay vigilant. If your sister or anyone else knows about this, they could try to sabotage you." Clara wasn't done. A week later, I found her standing on the porch, arms crossed, a smug grin on her face. "Nice place you've got here," she said, her tone dripping with sarcasm. "Too bad it's going to waste on you." "What do you want, Clara?" I asked, my patience wearing thin. "I'm here to make you an offer," she said, holding up a piece of paper. "Sell me the rights to whatever's in that chest. I'll give you a fair price." I laughed bitterly. "You think I trust you after everything you've pulled?" Her grin faltered. "You're making a mistake, Sam. This isn't over." "No," I said firmly. "It's not. But when it is, I'll be the one standing on top." A few days later, things took a turn for the worse. Somehow, news of the blueprints leaked. A small tech blog ran an article about the discovery of a forgotten invention, and while they didn't name me directly, it wasn't hard to connect the dots. My phone started ringing off the hook. Reporters, investors, even opportunists hoping to cash in on the story. It was chaos. Worst of all, I knew Clara had to be behind the leak. Desperation clawed at me. I called Dr. Cross, explaining the situation. "This speeds up the timeline," she said. "We need to move fast before someone else stakes a claim." "Can you still protect it?" I asked. "Yes, but it's going to cost you, financially and emotionally. Are you ready for that?" I didn't hesitate. "Do whatever it takes." The following weeks were a blur of meetings, legal battles, and sleepless nights. Clara tried to challenge my claim, hiring lawyers to argue that the chest and its contents belonged to both of us. But I'd anticipated her move and had already filed the necessary paperwork to secure sole ownership. When the court ruled in my favor, Clara's fury was palpable. "You think you've won?" she spat, her voice venomous. "This isn't the end, Sam." "No," I said, my voice steady. "It's just the beginning." Clara's threat hung in the air like a storm cloud, but I pushed forward, knowing I couldn't afford to let my guard down. With the court ruling in my favor and the blueprints secured under Dr. Cross's watchful eye, the project began to take shape. Investors were lining up, intrigued by the potential of my grandfather's invention, and the farm became a hive of activity. But Clara wasn't the type to admit defeat. 2 weeks after the court ruling, I received an anonymous tip, a text from an untraceable number. Check your barn. She's not done with you yet. I bolted to the barn, dread tightening my chest. Inside, everything looked untouched at first glance. But as I sifted through the tools and supplies, I noticed the padlock on the basement door had been tampered with. My heart sank. When I reached the basement, the chest was still there, but its contents had been rifled through. The gemstones were gone. Panic surged through me as I scrambled to confirm what was missing. The deeds and blueprints were untouched, thankfully, but the gemstones were nowhere to be found. Clara must have taken them. The thought of her holding onto something so valuable sent a fresh wave of fury coursing through me. I called Maggie and Dr. Cross immediately, informing them of the theft. Maggie's voice was calm but firm. You need to report this to the police, Sam. If Clara tries to sell those gems, there's a paper trail leading back to you. Dr. Cross agreed. The blueprints are the heart of this project, but those gemstones represent a significant portion of your grandfather's wealth. We need to track them down before Clara does something reckless. I filed a police report that evening, detailing everything I could about the stolen items. But deep down, I knew this wasn't going to be a simple recovery. Clara was clever and she had resources. If she'd taken the gems, she'd have a plan for them. The next day, Clara showed up at the farm again, uninvited and unrepentant. She leaned casually against her car, twirling her keys as if she didn't have a care in the world. Lose something? She asked with a sly smile. My jaw tightened. Give them back, Clara. Now. She tilted her head, feigning innocence. Give what back? I have no idea what you're talking about. You broke into my property, I said, stepping closer. And you stole from me. This isn't a game, Clara. You're in over your head. Her smile faltered for a moment, but she quickly recovered. Prove it, she said smugly. You've got nothing on me. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my temper in check. You think you've won, but you haven't. The police are involved now, and it's only a matter of time before they trace those gems back to you. Her eyes flickered with uncertainty, but she didn't respond. Instead, she got back in her car and drove off, leaving me seething. A week later, the police called with an update. A jeweler in a nearby city had reported someone trying to sell uncut gemstones matching the description I'd provided. The person had been careful, paying in cash and using a fake name, but surveillance footage showed a blurry image of Clara leaving the shop. The police assured me they were building a case, but I couldn't wait. I needed to act now. I contacted Maggie and Dr. Cross, sharing the update. Dr. Cross offered a solution I hadn't considered: hiring a private investigator to track Clara's movements and recover the gems. It's unconventional, she admitted, but if Clara's selling the gems piecemeal, we might be able to intercept her before she cashes out completely. I agreed, desperate for any advantage. The investigator, a sharp-eyed man named Marcus, began his work immediately, tracking Clara's financial activity and following her trail across the city. It didn't take long for Marcus to find a lead. Clara had scheduled a meeting with a potential buyer, a wealthy collector known for acquiring rare and valuable items off the record. Marcus suggested setting up a sting operation, coordinating with the police to catch Clara in the act. The plan was risky, but it was our best shot at recovering the gems. I agreed, my nerves on edge as the date of the meeting approached. The night of the operation, I waited anxiously near the collector's estate, hidden from view but close enough to see the action unfold. Clara arrived on time, dressed to impress and carrying a small velvet pouch. My chest tightened as I realized the gems were inside. Moments later, the police moved in, surrounding Clara and the buyer before they could finalize the deal. Clara's expression shifted from smug confidence to pure panic as the officers arrested her and confiscated the gems. The recovery of the gems was a relief, but the situation with Clara was far from resolved. She was released on bail within days, and her anger toward me had reached a boiling point. I knew she wouldn't stop until she found a way to sabotage me, or worse. Meanwhile, Dr. Cross finalized the patent for the blueprints, securing my grandfather's invention under my name. Investors were more interested than ever, and the project was gaining momentum. Despite Clara's efforts to derail me, I was finally seeing progress. Clara showed up at the farm one last time, uninvited as always. This time, her appearance was different, disheveled, desperate. She'd lost the upper hand and she knew it. "I don't want to fight anymore, Sam," she said, her voice softer than I'd ever heard it. "Can we just talk?" I crossed my arms, wary of her sudden change in demeanor. "Talk about what, Clara? How you've lied, stolen, and betrayed me?" Her eyes filled with tears. "I made mistakes, okay? I was angry, and I didn't think things through. But we're family, Sam. Can't we find a way to move forward?" Her words stirred something in me. Pity, maybe, or a flicker of hope. But I couldn't forget everything she'd done. "Family doesn't do what you did," I said firmly. "You made your choices, Clara. Now you have to live with them." After Clara left, I felt a strange sense of closure. For years, I'd been haunted by her shadow, always feeling like I was less than her. But now, I realized I didn't need her approval or her apology to move forward. I had my own path, my own legacy to protect. The farm became a symbol of that legacy. With the funds from the invention and the recovered gems, I restored the property to its former glory. The barn was no longer a decaying relic but a bustling hub of activity, a testament to the ingenuity and perseverance my grandfather had passed down to me. As the first prototype of my grandfather's invention rolled off the assembly line, I felt an overwhelming sense of pride. This wasn't just about wealth or success. It was about honoring the man who had believed in the future, even when the world hadn't believed in him. The invention was a game changer, garnering attention from industries and media worldwide. And while Clara's name was nowhere in the credits, she'd become a cautionary tale, a reminder of what happens when greed overshadows integrity. Standing on the porch of the farmhouse, I watched the sun dip below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of gold and crimson. The journey had been long, painful, and fraught with betrayal, but I'd emerged stronger. This farm, once dismissed as worthless dirt, had become the foundation of something extraordinary. Clara's laughter no longer haunted me. Instead, it was replaced by the quiet satisfaction of knowing I'd proven her, and everyone else, wrong. My grandfather's legacy was secure, and so was my place in the world. This was just the beginning. The echo of my mother's slap wasn't just a sound. It was a declaration. The sting on my cheek spread through my body like wildfire, igniting every ounce of fury and heartbreak within me. I looked at her, stunned, her perfectly manicured hands still raised, her face contorted in a mix of rage and disgust. "You're a disgrace to this family, Amelia," she hissed, her voice dripping with venom. She didn't even look at me. Her gaze burned holes through me, as if I were some ungrateful parasite she had the misfortune of birthing. My father stood beside her, rigid and cold, the very image of authority. His silence was louder than her screams. He always let her do the dirty work. "This isn't just about your behavior, it's about our name," she continued, throwing her hands in the air dramatically. "Do you have any idea what people are saying about us? About you? That the daughter of Michael and Eleanor Carter, one of the richest families in the city, is seen running around with those lowlifes?" I clenched my fists, my nails digging into my palms. "They're not lowlifes. They're my friends." My voice cracked, but I stood my ground. "They've been there for me when no one else was. When you weren't." Her eyes widened, and for a split second, I thought I'd struck a nerve. But then she laughed. A cold, hollow sound that made my stomach churn. "Friends? They're using you, Amelia, and you're too blind to see it." "That's enough," my father finally said, his voice calm but final. He stepped forward, his towering presence casting a shadow over me. "If you want to throw your life away, do it somewhere else. As of this moment, you're no longer a Carter." The words hit me like a freight train. "You're disowning me? Over this? Over my friends?" "You've made your choice," he said, his tone devoid of any emotion. Pack your things and leave. If you want to live like trash, go live with them. My heart pounded in my chest, the walls of the grand living room suddenly closing in on me. I looked at them, my parents, the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally, and saw nothing but strangers. You'll regret this, I whispered, my voice trembling. One day, you'll regret everything you've said and done. My mother smirked. Don't count on it. I turned on my heel and stormed out, tears streaming down my face. The sound of the grand doors slamming shut behind me was the final nail in the coffin. I was no longer Amelia Carter, the heiress. I was just Amelia. Outside, the world felt colder, harsher. The mansion loomed behind me, its grandeur now a cruel reminder of the life I'd been cast out from. I had no plan, no resources, just the clothes on my back and the determination burning in my chest. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was Sarah, my best friend since high school. Hey, you okay? You sound like you've been crying, she said the moment I answered. They kicked me out, I choked out, the reality of the situation finally sinking in. What? Her voice rose with shock and anger. Why? What happened? I'll tell you everything later, I said, my voice shaky. Can I crash at your place? Just for tonight? Of course. You don't even have to ask. An hour later, I found myself on Sarah's couch, clutching a warm cup of tea she had made for me. Her apartment was small and modest, a stark contrast to the sprawling mansion I'd grown up in, but it felt warmer, more welcoming. They're insane, Sarah said after I finished telling her everything. Who cares who your friends are? They should be proud of you for standing up for what you believe in. They've always cared more about their reputation than about me, I said bitterly. It's always been about appearances, about being perfect. Well, screw them, she said firmly. You don't need their money or their approval. You're stronger than they think. Her words gave me a small flicker of hope. Maybe she was right. Maybe this was my chance to prove them wrong. But the road ahead felt daunting, and I had no idea where to start. The next morning, reality hit hard. I had no job, no income, and no idea how to navigate a world I'd been shielded from my entire life. Sarah offered to help, but I didn't want to burden her more than I already had. I'll figure it out, I told her as I got ready to leave. Thank you for everything. You don't have to go, she said, her brow furrowed with concern. Stay as long as you need. I need to do this on my own, I said, trying to sound braver than I felt. I spent the day walking around the city, looking for work. Every rejection stung, but I refused to give up. By evening, I'd landed a job at a small diner. It wasn't glamorous, but it was a start. The first week was brutal. My feet ached from standing all day, and I struggled to keep up with the fast pace. But the other employees were kind, and for the first time in years, I felt a sense of camaraderie. One evening, as I was clearing tables, I heard a familiar voice. My stomach dropped. It was one of my parents' friends, Mrs. Davenport. She was sitting at a table with a group of women, laughing and sipping wine. Amelia? Is that you? She said, her eyes widening in shock as she recognized me. I froze, the tray of dirty dishes shaking in my hands. Hello, Mrs. Davenport, I said quietly. What on earth are you doing here? She asked, her voice loud enough for everyone to hear. Shouldn't you be at some fancy event with your parents? I work here, I said, my cheeks burning with embarrassment. She gasped, covering her mouth with her hand. Oh, darling, what happened? Did your parents cut you off? I didn't respond. I just turned and walked away, her laughter echoing behind me. That night, as I lay in bed, the humiliation replayed in my mind over and over. But instead of breaking me, it fueled a fire inside me. I was going to prove them all wrong. I was going to build a life so incredible, they'd regret ever underestimating me. The next morning, I woke up with a different kind of energy. The humiliation from the night before still stung, but it had sparked something in me, an unwavering determination. I stared at the ceiling, a plan slowly forming in my mind. If my parents thought I was destined to fail, I'd make sure to prove them wrong in ways they couldn't even imagine. I grabbed a notebook and started scribbling ideas. What did I want to do? What was I good at? Growing up in my family's suffocating world, I had been trained in everything from business etiquette to public speaking. I had the skills. I just needed to use them in my own way. As I made my list, Sarah walked in with 2 cups of coffee. "You look intense this morning," she said, handing me a mug. "What's going on?" "I'm done feeling sorry for myself," I said, my voice steady. "I'm going to build something they can't ignore." Her eyes lit up. "Now that's the Amelia I know. What's the plan?" I hesitated. "I don't have all the details yet, but I know I want to start my own business. Something small, something meaningful." Sarah grinned. "You've got this. And if you need help, I'm here." Her support meant everything. I didn't have much, but I had friends who believed in me. That was more than enough to get started. Starting a business was harder than I'd imagined. I spent hours researching, jotting down ideas, and reaching out to anyone who might have advice. I decided to open a small pop-up bakery. Baking had always been a passion of mine, a rare escape from the rigid expectations of my upbringing. Using the tips I'd learned from countless online tutorials, I made a batch of cupcakes and brought them to the diner. My coworkers were my guinea pigs, and to my surprise, they loved them. "These are amazing, Amelia," one of them said, taking another bite. "You could totally sell these." Encouraged by their reactions, I started small, selling baked goods at local markets on my days off. The first time someone bought one of my cupcakes, I felt a rush of pride. It wasn't much, but it was a start. One Saturday at the market, I noticed a woman lingering near my stall. She was impeccably dressed, her sharp eyes scanning my setup. After a moment, she walked up and bought a cupcake. "This is incredible," she said after taking a bite. "Do you run a bakery?" "Not yet," I admitted. "This is just a pop-up for now." She handed me her card. "Call me if you ever want to expand. I invest in small businesses, and I think you have potential." I stared at the card in disbelief. Her name was Catherine Bennett, and a quick Google search later revealed that she was a well-known entrepreneur. I couldn't believe someone like her had taken an interest in me. Over the next few weeks, I worked harder than ever. Between my shifts at the diner and baking late into the night, I barely had time to sleep. But every cupcake I sold brought me one step closer to my goal. Catherine and I stayed in touch, and she gave me invaluable advice. "Focus on your branding," she said during one of our calls. "What makes your bakery unique? What's your story?" At first, I hesitated to share my past. But then I realized that my story was what set me apart. I wasn't just another baker. I was someone who had fought to rebuild her life from scratch. I decided to name my bakery Rising Flower, a nod to my journey and resilience. A year after being disowned, I opened the doors to my first brick-and-mortar bakery. It was a small, cozy space, but it was mine. The grand opening was an emotional day. Sarah was there, of course, along with my coworkers from the diner and a handful of loyal customers who had supported me from the start. As I stood behind the counter, watching people enjoy my baked goods, I felt a sense of pride I'd never known before. This was more than a business. It was proof that I could thrive without my family's money or influence. But my journey was far from over. The bakery's success didn't go unnoticed. One afternoon, as I was restocking the display case, the doorbell jingled. I looked up and froze. My mother stood in the doorway, her expression a mix of shock and something I couldn't quite place. Was it regret or just curiosity? "Well," she said, her voice cool and clipped, "I didn't expect to find you here." I straightened my apron, forcing myself to stay calm. "What are you doing here?" She looked around, taking in the rustic charm of the bakery. "I heard about this place. I didn't realize it was yours." Her words were a slap in the face. She hadn't come to support me. She'd come to satisfy her curiosity. "I don't need your approval," I said firmly. "This is my life now." She raised an eyebrow. "We'll see how long it lasts." As she walked out, I felt a familiar pang of hurt. But this time it didn't break me. If anything, it only strengthened my resolve. My mother's visit lingered in my mind for days, not as a wound but as fuel. Her doubt was just another obstacle I'd crush underfoot. If she wanted to see me fail, she'd have to keep watching while I soared. The bakery grew busier by the week. Word spread quickly, and soon I wasn't just serving locals. I was attracting food bloggers, influencers, and even small-time journalists. One particularly busy Saturday, a reporter from the local paper came in to interview me. "Your story is inspiring," she said, setting her recorder on the counter. "From heiress to entrepreneur. People love a good comeback. What drives you?" I paused, considering her question. "Redemption," I said finally. "Not just proving others wrong, but proving to myself that I'm more than what they said I was." The article ran a week later with the headline, "Rising Flower: How One Woman Reclaimed Her Life Through Baking." It was surreal seeing my name in print, but even more surreal was what came next. The day after the article was published, the bell above the bakery door jingled, and I looked up to see someone I hadn't expected. My younger brother, Lucas. He was hesitant, standing awkwardly by the door. He looked different, more mature, but also more subdued. The confident smirk he always wore had been replaced by something softer. "Amelia," he said, almost a whisper. "Lucas," I replied, my tone cautious. "What are you doing here?" He stepped closer, his hands shoved deep into his pockets. "I read the article. I wanted to see you." For a moment, I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to tell him to leave, to remind him that he hadn't stood up for me when I needed him most. But another part of me, the part that missed my little brother, softened. "How's everyone?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. "Mom and Dad are the same," he said with a shrug. "But things aren't great at home. They don't talk about it, but I think they regret what they did." I raised an eyebrow. "Do they? Or are they just upset I'm not begging to come back?" He didn't answer, which told me all I needed to know. Over the next few weeks, Lucas became a regular visitor. He'd stop by the bakery after school or on weekends, helping out when things got busy. At first, I kept my guard up, unsure of his motives. But the more time we spent together, the more I saw glimpses of the brother I'd once adored. One evening, as we closed up shop, he finally opened up. "I'm sorry, Amelia," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "for not standing up for you. I was scared of losing them, but I lost you instead." His words hit me harder than I expected. For so long, I'd thought of my family as a monolith, cold, unyielding, and unloving. But Lucas's apology reminded me that there had been good moments too, moments worth holding on to. "I appreciate that," I said quietly. "But if you're here to play peacemaker, it won't work. I'm not going back." "I know," he said. I wanted you to know I'm proud of you." With Lucas's support, the bakery reached new heights. He suggested marketing ideas like partnering with local schools for fundraising events, which brought in even more customers. For the first time, I felt like I had a family member in my corner. But success brought new challenges. Managing the bakery was becoming overwhelming, and I needed help. That's when Sarah stepped in. "You've built something incredible, Amelia," she said one night as we shared a bottle of wine. "Let me help you take it to the next level." We became business partners, expanding the bakery's menu and launching a catering service. It wasn't long before Rising Flower became a household name in the city. One evening, as I was closing up, the door opened, and my father walked in. The sight of him in my bakery felt surreal. He looked older, more tired, but his presence still carried the weight of authority. "Amelia," he said, his voice softer than I'd ever heard it. "We need to talk." I crossed my arms, leaning against the counter. "I'm listening." He hesitated, his eyes scanning the bakery. "You've done well for yourself. Better than I expected." "Thanks," I said flatly. "But I doubt you're here to congratulate me." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I made a mistake. We made a mistake. Your mother and we were too harsh. We let our pride get in the way." I stared at him, waiting for the apology I'd longed to hear for years. But it didn't come. Instead, he said, "Your mother isn't well. She's been asking for you." My chest tightened. Despite everything, a part of me still cared. But I wasn't ready to let him off the hook. "It's funny how you're only here now that things are falling apart," I said, my voice cold. "Where were you when I needed you?" He looked down, guilt etched across his face. "I'm sorry, Amelia. Truly. But we need you. For the first time, the power dynamic between us had shifted. He was no longer the unshakable figure I'd grown up fearing. He was just a man, humbled by his own mistakes. I'll think about it, I said, turning away. But I'm not making any promises. That night I couldn't sleep. Memories of my mother flooded my mind, both the good and the bad. I thought about the way she used to brush my hair as a child, singing softly under her breath. I thought about the slap that had marked the end of our relationship. Could I forgive her? Did I even want to? I spent the next few days grappling with my father's visit. His words echoed in my mind, mingling with old memories I'd worked so hard to suppress. Part of me wanted to walk away, to let them deal with the mess they had created. But another part, the part that still longed for closure, was curious. What did my father mean when he said my mother wasn't well? Was this some ploy to manipulate me? Or was she truly sick? Lucas noticed the change in my demeanor during one of his visits. "You're quieter than usual," he said, leaning against the counter as I prepped an order. "Something on your mind?" Dad came by, I admitted, my voice low. His eyes widened. "What? When?" "A few nights ago." He said, "Mom's been asking for me. That she's not well." Lucas frowned, the carefree energy he usually brought into the bakery suddenly gone. "She's been different lately," he admitted. "Quieter. She doesn't go out as much." But I didn't think it was serious. "Do you think he's telling the truth?" I asked. He hesitated. "I don't know. But if he is, maybe you should see her." After much internal debate, I decided to go. Not for my father, and not even for my mother. I went for myself, to confront the ghosts of my past and find the answers I needed to move forward. When I arrived at the mansion, the sight of it felt both familiar and foreign. The grandeur I once took for granted now felt hollow, like a stage set built to impress but lacking any real warmth. The butler, who had always been kind to me, greeted me with a mix of surprise and relief. "Miss Amelia," he said, bowing slightly. "It's good to see you again." I nodded, unable to muster a smile. "Where is she?" He led me to the sitting room, where my mother was reclined on a chaise lounge, a blanket draped over her legs. She looked frilier than I remembered, her once radiant complexion pale and her eyes tired. But when she saw me, something flickered in her gaze, something that looked like hope. "Amelia," she said softly, her voice trembling. I stood in the doorway, unsure of how to feel. "You wanted to see me?" She nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. "I did. I wasn't sure if you'd come." "I almost didn't," I admitted, my tone colder than I intended. "Why now, Mom? Why ask for me after everything you said and did?" She looked down, her hands trembling as they clutched the edge of the blanket. "Because I was wrong," she whispered. "I let my pride and fear ruin our relationship. And now, I might not have much time left to make things right." Her words cut deep, but they weren't enough to erase the years of pain she had caused. "You disowned me, Mom," I said, my voice trembling. "You told me I was a disgrace. Do you have any idea what that did to me?" She flinched as if I had slapped her, and for a moment, I felt a pang of guilt. But I pushed it aside, determined to make her understand. "I had nothing," I continued. "No money, no support. I had to figure out how to survive on my own while you and Dad acted like I didn't exist. And now you expect me to forgive you because you're sick." Tears streamed down her face, but she didn't look away. "I don't expect your forgiveness," she said. "I don't deserve it. But I need you to know that I regret every decision I made that hurt you. You were right, Amelia, about everything." The sincerity in her voice took me by surprise. For the first time, I saw not the cold, controlling woman who had raised me, but a flawed, broken person trying to atone for her mistakes. I didn't forgive her that day, but I didn't walk away either. Instead, I stayed for an hour, listening as she shared memories of the times she had been proud of me but had been too stubborn to say so. It wasn't enough to erase the past, but it was a start. As I left the mansion, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Anger, sadness, and a flicker of something I hadn't felt in years. Hope. Back at the bakery, life continued to thrive. Sarah and I were working on plans to open a second location, and our catering service was gaining traction. We had even started hosting baking classes, which quickly became a hit with the community. Despite the success, my mother's words lingered in my mind. I found myself wondering if reconciliation was truly possible, or if our wounds were too deep to heal. One afternoon, as I was teaching a baking class, my father walked in. His presence startled me, and I nearly dropped the tray of cupcakes I was holding. The students fell silent, sensing the tension in the room. "Amelia," he said, his voice soft. "Can we talk?" I hesitated but nodded, leading him to the back office. Once the door closed, I crossed my arms and faced him. "What is it now?" He looked uncomfortable, his usual confidence replaced by uncertainty. "Your mother told me what she said to you, about admitting she was wrong. And," I prompted, my tone sharp, "and she's not the only one who owes you an apology," he admitted. "I failed you, Amelia. I failed as a father. I was so focused on maintaining our image that I forgot what really mattered." His words surprised me, but I wasn't ready to let him off the hook. "You didn't just fail me," I said. "You abandoned me when I needed you most. That's not something I can forget." "I don't expect you to," he said, his voice heavy with regret. "But I'm here now, and I want to make things right." It wasn't an instant reconciliation, but my father's visit marked another step in the healing process. Over the next few weeks, he and my mother made more of an effort to reach out, attending my baking classes and supporting the bakery. It was awkward at first, but slowly, the walls between us began to crumble. The dynamic between my parents and me grew more complex as time passed. Their gestures of reconciliation were steady but cautious. My mother started visiting the bakery more often, sitting quietly at a corner table and watching as I worked. She never demanded my attention but always smiled when I caught her eye. One day, as I was restocking the display case, she approached the counter. "These are beautiful, Amelia," she said, her voice soft and genuine. "Your creativity shines through in everything you do." I didn't respond immediately. I wanted to believe her words were sincere, but the scars of her past actions made me wary. "Why now, Mom?" I asked, my tone guarded. "Why make an effort after all this time?" She sighed, her hands fidgeting with the strap of her designer purse. "Because I realized I've missed out on so much. I thought protecting the family name was the most important thing, but what's a name without the people who carry it? I know I can't undo the damage I've done, but I want to try." Her words tugged at something deep inside me. For years, I'd longed to hear her say something like this, but now that she had, I didn't know how to respond. "It's going to take time," I said finally, "and it's not just about words. I need to see actions." "I understand," she said, a faint smile on her lips, "and I'll prove it to you." While my relationship with my parents remained tentative, Lucas proved to be an unwavering source of support. He continued helping at the bakery, offering new ideas and learning the ins and outs of the business. "You've got a knack for this?" I told him one day as we worked on a catering order together. He grinned. "Maybe I've finally found something I'm good at." Honestly, I never thought I'd enjoy working, but this feels different. His enthusiasm was infectious, and it wasn't long before he started taking on more responsibility. He even suggested opening a third location, pitching the idea with a level of passion and detail that surprised me. "You've grown up, Lucas," I said, genuinely impressed. "I'm proud of you." The words seemed to mean a lot to him, and for the first time in years, I felt like we were truly siblings again. One afternoon, as I was reviewing invoices in the back office, I received a phone call from Catherine Bennett, the investor who had supported me in the early days of my business. "Amelia," she said, her voice warm and enthusiastic, "I've been following your progress, and I have to say, I'm impressed. Your story, your resilience, it's inspiring. Have you ever thought about franchising?" The idea had crossed my mind, but I'd always dismissed it as too ambitious. "I don't know," I admitted. "It feels like a big step." "It is," she agreed. "But I think you're ready. If you're interested, I'd love to mentor you through the process." The conversation left me buzzing with excitement and nerves. Franchising would mean taking Rising Flower to a whole new level, but it also came with risks. I knew I'd need to discuss it with Sarah and Lucas before making any decisions. As I prepared for the next phase of my business, an unexpected discovery rocked my world. While cleaning out the office at the bakery, I found an envelope addressed to me. Inside was a letter from my mother, dated shortly after I had been disowned. The letter was raw and unfiltered, filled with regret and sorrow. She wrote about how she had stayed awake at night wondering if she'd made the right decision, how she'd kept tabs on me through mutual acquaintances, and how proud she was of my courage, even if she couldn't admit it at the time. By the time I finished reading, tears were streaming down my face. The letter was proof that she had cared all along, even if she hadn't shown it. Armed with the letter, I decided to confront my mother. I found her sitting in the garden at the mansion, her favorite spot. She looked up as I approached, her expression wary but hopeful. "I found this," I said, holding up the letter. "Why didn't you send it?" She looked down, her hands trembling. "Because I was a coward," she admitted. "I wanted to reach out, but I was afraid you'd reject me. I didn't think I deserved your forgiveness." Her honesty disarmed me. "You should have tried," I said, my voice breaking. "Maybe things would have been different." "I know," she said, her eyes glistening with tears. "But I'm here now, and I'll do whatever it takes to make things right." For the first time, I saw her not as the cold, controlling woman who had hurt me, but as someone who was deeply flawed and genuinely remorseful. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a start. With Catherine's guidance, Sarah, Lucas, and I began preparing to launch the first franchise of Rising Flower. The process was grueling, but the excitement of bringing our brand to new communities kept us going. On the day of the grand opening for the franchise, my entire family showed up, my mother, my father, and Lucas. Seeing them together, standing in the crowd and cheering for me, was a moment I'd never expected. Felt like a full-circle moment, a testament to how far I'd come. Years later, Rising Flower had become a nationwide brand, with franchises in dozens of cities. My parents, once my greatest critics, became some of my biggest supporters. My mother, now frail but still sharp, often visited the bakery, proudly telling anyone who would listen that her daughter was the founder. But the greatest victory wasn't the success of the business or even the reconciliation with my family. It was the person I had become. I was no longer the naive heiress or the disowned outcast. I was Amelia, a woman who had fought for her dreams and won. As I stood in the original bakery, now a landmark in the city, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. The journey had been painful, but it had shaped me into someone stronger, wiser, and more compassionate. And as I watched a new generation of bakers learn their craft in the space I'd built, I knew I'd created something that would outlast me. A legacy of resilience, redemption, and rising above.